So without further ado, and hoping that technology its part and works, we will crack on. So hopefully everyone's here for the right thing. So the Community Emergency Fund that's been released by Sport England, the aim of the evening is to just go through what it is, who can apply, some finer details about it, and hopefully we'll be able to support organisations across the Humber and North Yorkshire to apply for the fund. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Gary Sainty. I'm the Deputy CEO at Active Humber. So it covers the East Riding, whole North and North East Lincolnshire. I'll let Damien from North Yorkshire introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Damien Smith, Head of Development at North Yorkshire Sport, and my colleague Laura Young's here with us as well. Laura's going to be hopefully fielding some of the questions and picking up on the stuff that we might not do if we're sort of presenting. But yeah, we cover North Yorkshire and York in terms of the county coverage.
So just a bit of virtual housekeeping. Hopefully everyone's keeping well at this time. It is obviously relying on the IT systems that we've got by Teams and via webinars and what have you. I have to say, the largest meeting I've had during this period with 50 odd people on it, but all being well, it should be fine. Like I've mentioned, we are recording this, and we will share it on our social media channels and website and what have you following today as well, so it will be able to be viewed again all by your colleagues and people that are working within your clubs. We're going to keep this fairly informal. I am at home. I do have kids. They are all downstairs at the minute, so we shouldn't hear a peep from them, but you never know. So if that does happen, we'll apologise, but obviously it's a strange time as we're all in at the minute. We've talked about everybody being on mute, and like I say, if the internet speed does start slowing down, then turning videos off might help with that. If anybody does have any questions throughout the evening, throughout the next half an hour or so, please raise them via the chat functions, and like Damien said, Laura will get to them and stop us every now and then. We obviously have had a few questions in from the registration, so thank you for sending those in. I think we've got pretty much an answer for all of them. Hopefully a lot of them will be covered during the actual slides, but if you feel that your question hasn't been raised, then please just do shout again, and we'll get on to that. And then finally, after we've finished tonight, I will send out an email to everyone with a quick survey on it, just a few questions, as a bit of a evaluation of the webinar, hopefully that we'll get across the relevant details to you, but also it allows us to judge what support in the future as well. So that will all be coming out to you, and if you could just fill that in, that would be appreciated. So I just thought I would first off put up our contact for both Active Humber and North Yorkshire Sport. You can get in touch with us via our websites, via email, or via our Facebook and Twitter channels. Also, you may wish to go directly to Sport England if you've got any specific questions that you feel they need to answer, and Sport England's email address that's been set up for this time is also on the screen as well. So those contacts will come up again at the end. It might be that we can't answer everybody's questions today, especially if they're specific or unique to your situation. We will give you our best advice, but there may be some bits and pieces that you do need to think, actually we'll go directly to Sport England for those as well. It'd be remiss not to, I suppose, preach to the converted, but obviously during this time it is very important that we all do stay active. We are one of only a handful of countries that have actually listed exercise as one of the reasons that you are allowed out of your house. So please do take full advantage of that. Keep fit, keep healthy, do follow government guidelines as well, though. You know, staying 2 meters apart from people, only going local, but it is important that we all keep active at this time, and hopefully you'll encourage your members and what have you to do the same as well. With that, I'm going to hand over to Damien to take us through the first little bit. I think, Damien, you might be on mute still.
Oh, there you go. First Rick. It's because my kids were in the bath shouting about. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Right, straight onto it. So in terms of the coronavirus, Sport England have reacted really quickly. We think within a couple of days, actually, in terms of a support package. So it was on the 31st of March when the support package was announced. In total, there's 195 million. What they've said is that the resources across the whole package is there to protect the sport and physical activity sector throughout the crisis. So there's a very clear steer on it protecting the sector, both now and into sort of the medium terms. So they've been really clear on that. What we're going to do this evening is focus specifically on the Community Emergency Fund. And what I would say is all of the information that we're going to go through, both Gary and I, is as correct as we've kind of got it today. Things are moving quite quickly. The fund itself is moving quite quickly as people are applying. So we would urge people, if you are keen to apply, and you can do so sooner rather than later than to do that. In terms of the situation, as I say, it is changing, and the details of the fund may change. If that does, then both Active Humber and North Yorkshire Sport keep our social media channels updated and our website updated, and we'll make sure that any changes to the funding goes out. And what we'll probably say is, given that we've got all of your emails now specifically about this fund, we'll make sure that we get a direct communication out to you guys as well. Next, in terms of the innovation funding that's on there, there's very little information about it at the minute. So again, it will emerge in this next couple of weeks, but the innovation funding is a little slow. But the large kind of bulk of tonight is around the Community Emergency Fund. Gary, if you want to nudge it on, please. So what's it for? What it's there for is to deliver immediate funding to clubs and organisations who are most in need. And again, it's on the back of a number of previous funds that they've done that around emergency funding, flood funding. So it's quite quick. The process is there to give you as quick a decision as possible. It's targeted at organisations who are not currently funded by Sport England and plus those that are. But the key thing is that the organisations that apply play a key role in getting people and keeping people active. In terms of what they want, it's around short-term financial hardship. That's the one significant kind of sentence, I guess, or the one significant piece of information, that it is about that supporting clubs and organisations around financial hardship during COVID-19. It is unprecedented times. There's lots of people who are losing roles and being furloughed, and working from home seems to be the new. I actually can't figure out whether I'm working from home or I'm living at work at the minute, but it's all merging into one. But sports clubs are equally affected, and as you can imagine and would know, almost all activity is ceasing. We are really pleased to see lots of online, I should say, ways of clubs and sports clubs engaging with their participants. So that is brilliant. We've seen a really quick reaction to that, but there's huge amounts that just isn't happening and can't happen. So the fund is there to support financial hardships. It's not about running new things. It's not about additional kind of nice to do things. And there are lots of things that we would want to do and want to use Sport England's money for. This particular fund is about the short-term financial hardship that the sector is there. And Gary will take you on to who can apply.
So in terms of who can apply for the fund, Sport England have tried to keep it as broad as they can in terms of organisations and clubs that can apply. The fund, like Damien said, is supposed to be or the application process rather, is supposed to be as light touch as possible, asking for the absolute relevant need. However, there does need to be some criteria set against all funds, especially with it being public money that Sport England are able to award. We'll come on to the actual details of the fund criteria in a little while. We're just going to kind of go through some of the immediate things up front. So in terms of who can apply, there's those people on the screen in terms of industry sectors. providing sport or physical activity apply. One of the questions is what type of organisation are you? It is there for non-commercial, so not-for-profit organisations, etc., can apply, but those profit-making businesses, this is the fund for those to apply to. There are other schemes for them to go to. There is also another box in there as well, and that's because we know that the sports sector doesn't always fit nicely into the boxes that are out there. So if you think you are an organisation providing physical activity or sports, want to be able to apply, then
Gary, I think a few people are struggling to hear you.
Extra struggling to hear.
Yeah, I think it keeps freezing. I don't know if it might be worth pausing or taking the videos off.
Okay. So if everybody, I can mute all, but I cannot take everyone's videos off. I can turn my own camera off, so you don't have to look at me and you can just look at the screen anyway. I suppose Damien and Laura, if you do the same, and anybody else then that is on, that has got their video cameras switched on, then please do switch them off. It might just help a little bit with the connectivity and the connection. If we are still having problems, please do raise it, and again Laura will shout as well. So in terms of this slide, again, I'm not quite sure what people have heard or haven't heard, but the information is pretty much as is on the screen. Like I say, there are some areas and other organisations that can apply, and it is worth having a look and doing so. Ultimately, it is better to apply for the fund and be turned down than to not apply at all and obviously struggle through this period. So again, we'd advise organisations to look at this. If you're experiencing financial hardship, then it is worth looking at and applying. Obviously, on the flip side of who can apply, there are always a few organisations that cannot apply to this fund. Those are fairly minimal and they are up on the screen at the minute. Local authorities, schools, education providers, commercial providers. Like I say, this is a grassroots fund, and therefore commercial and those businesses that are trying to create profit are not eligible for this. Equally, those that are self-employed cannot apply for this as well, although there's a caveat there as well. Effectively, there are a number of government schemes that have obviously come up during this period to try and support a wide range of the country and all the different aspects to those affected. So it's first, and obviously we know that there's things around employment and self-employed that you should look towards first. If they don't cover your needs, your costs that you're obviously having to pay out, then you can apply for this and you can put in the reasons why your self-employed staff may need to be funded through this scheme as well.
So on to me, what can be funded? Can you hear me? Yeah. It will fund standard items. So a lot of the standard items that are attached, the fixed costs that are attached to kind of operating during lockdown, that you'll still be paying for as organisations. Things like rent, utility costs, overheads, insurance, and as you can see, there's some kind of other bits and pieces on the slide there. The fund is there to help items or fund items where your income can no longer support those costs during this period. So where if your income's been suspended, and like lots of clubs and organisations, you'd be getting kind of zero in, but you've still got things to pay out. Casual staff is in there, although the government guidance isn't as clear in this area. What we've kind of discussed and found out from Sport England is that they will cover casual staffing costs that cannot be met by other government support. So there is other support out there for self-employed and for employees around furloughing of staff. So what they've sort of said is that the casual staff costs could be met, but only as a last resort. If there are other government sources, you would need to go to those first. If you were a club that was due to employ seasonal staff, so again, there's lots of summer sports will do, they can help on this front. What we would say is that using last year's accounts in your application can help prove it. So if you were a club that was due to bring in some casual staff for a period of time, if your accounts from the previous year show that expenditure, that's pretty good proof that it would be happening again. Some of the examples of things that it will fund. So just a couple of examples: a boxing club who to pay for the utility bills and other costs associated with running when there's absolutely no activity, so there's therefore no income. So that's kind of just a quick example. And another is what it could fund is a local league who paid for equipment to run a competition, which is now cancelled, so therefore will not receive the money that the league would have got from that competition. So just a kind of a couple of examples of fairly common things that we're sort of seeing. Gary, can you move it on one, please? In terms of what it can't fund.
Sorry, Damo, we do have a question about retrospective costs from the 1st of March. Does that mean costs before the 1st of March?
You can only, my understanding is you can only apply for costs from the 1st of March through until the end of July. Anything prior to that you cannot claim for, but from the 1st of March you can. If you have lost that, if you've had to cancel something as a result of COVID-19, it's about reclaiming what you've lost. If you've had a period of time in March, let's say you operated in the first 2 weeks of March, you would claim from the point where things stopped. So that's my understanding. The time period is a 3 month period though. So cannot be funded. In terms of this is a fund for last resort. So again, if you can claim via the other government funding that was announced by Rishi Sunak a few weeks ago around staffing and other things, then you'll not be eligible for this. And again, they've made that really clear. New activities and events. Again, are not eligible. This isn't a development fund, and again, we recognise that clubs would want to do lots of new and great stuff, but it's not a development fund at this stage. It's one that's been designed to support the existing clubs and organisations through a really difficult period. In terms of capital costs and costs beyond July 2020, again, they're not eligible either. What they have said is there will be, as the picture emerges and as things change, there will be different funds as we start to emerge from the current situation. So they are reviewing things. If we end up, I've just seen a question pop up, so I'll answer it on the chat. If things do go on longer, and I hope that they don't, but if they do, then the fund will follow the lockdown period as well. That's kind of what I imagine will happen. Again, Tim Hollinsworth, the chief exec, has been pretty clear about consistently reviewing what's going on. So again, if there are any changes, if there's any extension to the funding, we will make sure that we are pushing that out through our social media channels, through our website, and as I say, because we've got all of your contact details now, we will push something out directly to you as well. Gary, if you want to move on to your slide.
Yeah. So yeah, and I suppose just to emphasise that as well, because some of the questions that we had in obviously part of the registration was around, can we do works to the club? Can we develop our space effectively that we are providing for sport and physical activity? The answer to that is no. This is it's not a development fund. It is a fund to cover financial hardship. So all of those development tech projects are not eligible for this fund. There may well be others, certainly on facilities and what have you, but that's not what this fund is about. In terms of how much can be funded, it follows previous funding streams that Sport England have put out there. It follows the small grants scheme and the flood relief fund, that was out earlier in the year as well. So it's predominantly between £300,000 and £10,000 grants will be awarded. In very exceptional circumstances, they will go beyond £10,000. Obviously, for that to happen, you would need to evidence why you would need more than £10,000, and obviously evidence that money would have been brought in anyway, and also your outgoings are obviously to such an extent that it warrants something above £10,000. As picked up on the chat and what have you as well, the timeframes are there on the screen. So between the 1st of March and the 31st of March, which obviously does mean there is a little bit of projection of losses to be done. Obviously, we're not on the 31st of July at present, so there is a little bit of projection to be done there. And like it's been said, this is where previous accounts will help and will help evidence to Sport England that something normally does happen isn't happening because of the coronavirus and the activity that's ceased and what have you. And like Damien said a couple of minutes ago, Sport England are effectively reviewing the situation continuously. They haven't said yet as to if it does continue beyond the 31st of July, what the process will be, but they have had talks around, is there a second stage application? Is there a top-up fund that can be provided? But obviously all of that is going to be constantly reviewed, constantly looked at, and we will get the information out to you as and when we hear from Sport England as to what that includes. I'm just going to pause at this point because I haven't really been keeping an as we've been talking. So are there any questions, Laura, that we need to pick up now just on the kind of bare bones of the fund itself?
We've answered all the ones that have come up. We do have one, Damien Smith. If we received a business support grant of 10,000, would that eliminate our club from applying for this fund?
Is that a Sport England grant or some other grant?
It's not, doesn't go into it on the question. Maybe if he can unmute himself and he can speak.
Okay, well, we can come back.
One more as well from Hugh, if we don't hear back from Damien, is if clubs have existing funds, are they excluded from applying for the grant, i.e. do they have to use their savings first?
Okay, we will pick that up a little bit later in the financial part of the application, but in theory, no, they won't be penalised for having reserves or other finance. But it is about financial hardship. Again, we can't kind of emphasise that enough. This is about the principle behind the fund is about survival. It is about keeping as much of the sport and physical activity sector in place now, surviving through this period, so that once the lockdown is lifted and things go back to normal, that sport and physical activity can thrive again. So if you are not in need, then I would suggest not applying, but obviously we know that there are lots of clubs and organisations out there that are suffering financially, and that could see the demise of their activities, the closure long term of clubs and what have you, and that's what this fund is there to stop and support people to overcome.
Gary, can I just jump in? It's Damien, the other Damien Smith, the one presenting. There's been a question on from Robert about how we're going to answer all the questions invited prior to today. What I've done with those, just so everyone knows, is I sent those over to Sport England. Quite a lot of them will be answered through the webinar, but some were a bit more complex. And what I've done is I've sent that over to Sport England and they've come back with an answer. What I would say on those kind of more complex ones is that we will go back to those individuals with the answer. So we know exactly who asked what. We've sent the questions over exactly as they were when we weren't sure either way, or we just wanted to steer. But they've come back and answered every single one. So thanks, Robert, for raising it. If you've got one of the more complex ones that we don't answer throughout the kind of course of the next however long, we will directly get something to you in the next day or so.
Okay, and I have just seen the business grant question about business rates provided through the local council, so it wasn't a Sport England grant initially. Effectively, if parts of that then have been paid, then obviously we're not looking at double funding through this fund. You should have had a certain amount of funding for a specific thing. If then there is still financial hardship for maybe other income that's been lost, or the fact that you're not getting your normal subscriptions and what have you through, then that element can be funded via this fund as well. So it doesn't, if you've already got a grant in for an element of the losses that you've incurred, obviously please don't reapply for that again. But any other element that you still will struggle with, you can apply for. So hopefully that's the answer to that question. Okay, is there any more before we move on? Obviously, we've got another kind of break in a little bit once we've gone through the criteria of the fund as well. So if your question hasn't been answered or you haven't quite put it down in the chat box, we will pick it up. And like I said, if we don't answer some of those questions that have come through, other than the ones that are a little bit more complex, like Damien said, then we will pick them up at the end as well. So on then to the fund, the application, what people need to do to actually get a grant. So the application itself, the application form, which is online, it's fairly simple to get through. Effectively, it has 4 sections to it. One that's around the contact details of your club, and one that's around the actual organisation's details as well. So the person that's applying and the club that's in that's applying for it. So those 2 sections should be fairly straightforward for anyone that's applying. The 3rd section relates to the funding itself and what it is you are in need of. So that's all done in section 3, and then 4 is any other kind of related information that you need to provide. So that's kind of the 4 question areas of the online form that you'd get through. Through those 4 sections, the 4 criteria that you see on the screen will be assessed. We're going to go through each one of these individually. So going through the kind of audience and the reach of your club, the role that you play in the community, let's say the financial need, and then the impacts of not receiving any funding. So we'll go through each one of them separately, and then again, if there's any questions, we'll answer them at the end of this section. So in terms of the audience and reach, again, Sport England are very much expecting that there will be a huge demand on this fund. I know prior to today that there's already been over 3,500 applications go into this fund. So again, emphasising that point from Damien earlier on about if you do think you are in need and you are going to be applying for this fund, do apply sooner rather than later, because the chances are that the longer this goes on as well, obviously the demand probably will outstrip the resource that is there. There are some areas that will be targeted in terms of the funding. It's about getting to those people most at need, the clubs and also the communities that they reach. So the points that are on the screen in terms of disadvantaged areas, which includes rural deprivation as well, target groups such as women and girls, disabled people, etc., etc. They're all there. There will be specific priority given to those groups. It doesn't mean that anybody that's not targeting those groups can't apply. Absolutely, but we're aware just from being physically active that certain groups of people have more challenges with being physically active, or the numbers in some of these groups are higher in terms of physical inactivity, which is why they gain a bit more priority as we go through this. And in terms of the application form as well, this whole section relates to question 29, which is effectively, please describe the work that your organisation does and who in the community, takes part. So that's your area to write a little bit around what you do, who you reach, who the membership of yours, who accesses your activities, and kind of get that across to Sport England. I don't think, as I said, it's a light touch application, so we're not expecting War and Peace on this. It just gives Sport England a bit of a steer as to the club and the organisation that's applying. And then in terms of the role you play, effectively what Sport England want to see and want to fund is those clubs that have been actively delivering in the community over the last 12 months and beyond in reality, and those that are also staying in touch with their participants during this period as well. Obviously, if the sport sector and physical activity sector is going to thrive again, we have no idea how long this period is going to last. We do want to know that actually the clubs are still engaging with their members, whether that be through WhatsApp groups, through online activities. There's been lots of great stuff that's come out that we've seen that sports clubs are kind of adapting to, and Sport England want to hear from you in terms of how you are going to stay in touch, so that once this period does end, you still have an active membership base there that will hopefully come back to the sport and do stuff. I'll pause there as well, because this again was one of the questions that we had prior to, in terms of how are clubs engaging with their members, and do we have any examples? Which we do. We've heard of some. We've got lots of online activities going on, which I'm sure you've seen, whether they've been national or local ones. Lots of challenges that clubs have created for their members to go and do, following government guidelines and what have you. But again, if you've got examples of how you're engaging with your members and what's worked for you, it would be great to share them with us, whether that be on the chat box or drop an email to myself or Damien after today. And it would be great to share those great examples that is happening, to say, look, this is how the sport physical activity sector has responded to this crisis, and this is how we are trying to keep people active during this time as well. So it is really important for Sport England to understand that you are an active club or organisation, and you are constantly staying in touch with your members as well.
On to me, financial aid. Going back to the principles behind the fund, it's about supporting those who will experience that financial hardship as a result of COVID-19 and coronavirus. So Sport England are really keen to know about that financial hardship element on the application form, particularly around the short-term impact on your organisation. Many clubs will not have huge reserves. In fact, lots of clubs don't have any reserves, as we kind of know, to call on, and cash flow is a real issue for clubs. Question 23 to 28 on the actual form itself, on the online form, asks about that financial impact, including how the requested funds will be spent and the amount needed. So again, they're really clear about, tell us exactly what you want and tell us exactly how you're gonna spend it. You'll need to be really clear on the application about how you've calculated the funds and the amount you've asked for. And again, remember, it's based on need. So they're really clear about that. What I would say is your previous year's accounts are a really good way to show that need and what the income and expenditure could have looked like at this point in terms of fixed cost and things. If you don't have a prepared set of accounts as a club or an organisation, bank statements and from a similar period in that previous year could prove to be really useful. They're really not trying to make clubs jump through too many hoops, but equally, clubs and organisations need to be able to show exactly what they're losing as a result of what's gone on. What I would just say in terms of reserves, and again, a number of people have asked this, Sport England are interested in those reserves, but again, because it's about that survival, they recognise that clubs have reserves, sinking funds, planned expenditure. They're not expecting you to spend this first. It's fine to have those reserves. You'll need to provide detail as to what you've got and why you can't spend it, basically. So what they've said is things like committee meeting notes. If you've committed a certain amount of money to a sinking fund for a particular thing, or your roof needs you've committed to because your roof needs redoing in 6 months, whatever it is. If you've already got that commitment to spend that money, then that's fine. You having reserves does not preclude you from getting this money. But clearly, if you sat on hundreds of thousands of pounds reserves just sat there, then that's where we go back to the ethos of it. It's about hardship. But all I would say is, in terms of reserves, they want that justification why you've got it, and if you've got the justification, then you're perfectly fine on that one. In terms of when you're submitting the documents as well on that financial need, things like accounts, things like prepared accounts and stuff like that, it should be fairly self-explanatory, famous last words, on the application form. And what they do, they ask you to submit certain aspects on email. But again, as you go through the application online, it'll tell you exactly where to send things. Gary, do you want to move on a slide, please?
We have had a couple of questions. If you want to pick any of them up before moving on, or would you want to wait until...
Can I just carry on? Is that okay? And I'll pick them back up as and when. I might not be able to answer them all, and as I say, we'll if we can't answer them, we will get the answers for you guys. In terms of what it won't for, the impact of not receiving the fund. Again, this is about the consequences of not getting it. It's the last criteria on the application itself, and again, it goes back to Sport England having and keeping the sport and physical activity sector in a position to thrive once the restrictions are ended. So in terms of the consequences of not getting some funding, this could be as extreme as the club closing. It could, unfortunately, it could be as extreme as that, closing the doors for good or not being able to operate again. And clearly we wouldn't want that. It could be that the club can't operate at the same level or provide as many teams or sessions. And again, there's a number of clubs come forward to say that's kind of more of the impact. It's not necessarily shutting the doors. It's that there is a threat to certain aspects of the club. It should relate in terms of the consequences of not getting the funding. It should relate to the audience and reach that Gary mentioned. So in terms of who you are already helping and supporting and how your club runs, it may mean that the boys section at a club continues, and the girls section is under threat, or as equally as possible, vice versa. And that one of the sections is struggling. And it could be that certain age groups could survive and others really struggle. So it's not it doesn't have to be the demise of your club to access the funding, and we hope that isn't the case. But it's about whether hopefully if it's not the demise of your club, then it is about that financial hardship. And we've mentioned it a few times, but they're really, really clear about what this funding is there to do. Nudge on, Gary, if you can, please. In terms of the application form, so this slide, what I would say is, and I think Gary's mentioned it a couple of times, it's very light touch, or as light touch as we've ever known a Sport England application. They are not expecting huge amounts of information, and this slide shows how it's kind of broken down. 33 questions in all. The first 20 are about who you are as an organisation, so we're hoping are relatively straightforward.
I think you might just broken up a little bit then, Damien, sorry. Okay. Just when you were talking about the questions. So the first 20 are...
Yes, I'll put that back to you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So the first 20 questions on the application are about you as an organisation. So we hope that they're relatively straightforward. And what I would say is that this is a much quicker fund than any of the ones we've seen before, and rightly so, because it's about financial hardship and reacting. Gary, it's worth noting as well, just before I do move on, that the process has been put together really quickly and at pace, and that is they have reacted within 3 or 4 days of lockdown to acknowledge a package of support, and yeah, they've been pretty quick at that. There's a couple of errors on the form, which I'm hoping by now they have fixed. But I think questions 26 and 28.
Again, it just cut off a little.
Can you hear me now? I'm going to be saying that a lot.
It's cutting off. Yeah, it's cutting off a little bit. So effectively what it's saying, and I don't know whether you can hear me any better than Damien. So please, Laura, Damien, tell me if it is stuttering or you can't hear us. But effectively, there are a couple of errors on the form due to the pace that it was put together at. Hopefully they've been fixed now, but there are notes on the form where those errors exist. And it really just relates to when you're answering a certain question, there's a kind of follow-up question, and some of the numbering is not quite right. So that there's just a couple of notes on there. So as you're going through the form, please do read the questions. Please read the bits that are in brackets next to it, as it's quite important to obviously get the right information across to Sport England about the need of your club or organisation.
In terms of what happens next, then I can see a few messages saying people can hear me, so that's good. Once it's submitted, you will hear back within 7 to 10 days, and that's the current kind of return. Again, I spoke to a member of Sport England investment team today, and they're working flat out, and they've got a lot of applications coming in. What they've said is, if you're successful, payments will be made 7 to 10 days after that. So if things go to plan, and it is that quick process, you could have that money within a 2-week period, which, if anyone's accessed Sport England money previously, that is a ridiculously short period of time. This may change. That note of caution is this may change as more and more people our applications are made. But at the minute, as I say, once you click submit, they're trying to get back to people within that 7-day period. And if successful, again, the money will be in your account within a 7-day period too. Gary, do you want to move the slide on, please?
Yeah, this is the point where we are pausing again for questions. So we'll get Laura to shout some out to us. I've just got one before we do get some questions, and that was around some of the other government schemes that are out there, and if you are effectively eligible for both, should you apply for both for the same thing? Currently, with obviously all the government departments working together and all this, what we're being told is, or the advice is, apply for both, apply for what you need through the scheme that you think you're eligible for. But there is a caveat in that of, if you were successful within two different schemes, we need people to be honest. We need you guys to be honest. There is the risk of, if you're not honest, then actually when the government departments do check, you will lose all the funding. So there is something in there of apply to the funds that you're eligible for, but this is about keeping as much of the sport and physical activity sector surviving as possible, and not kind of going out there for every penny that we can get, sort of thing. So yeah, there is a question there in terms of which schemes you can apply for and what have you. So Laura, do we have any other questions that have come through that we?
Yes, we do. We've got Anthony. Is it possible to apply for support for maintenance costs of tennis courts this season, considering many of our members have not paid subscriptions yet? They're grass courts.
Presumably that is maintenance that would take place anyway, and again that would be shown through your annual accounts and your costs as to how much the maintenance fees are on tennis courts, and then obviously normally you would have an income against that to say it's membership fees that are paying for that. If the membership fees aren't there because of the current situation, then obviously you've got some outgoings there that still need to be covered. There will be a question, I think, asked as to when that is done. Obviously, you can maintain them now, and they'll not get played on still. You can maintain them in a little bit of time, and then they will. So the answer to that is yes, they apply, as long as they can show that it is a yearly cost that is paid out by the clubs, and obviously the income that would normally cover that isn't there anymore.
Thank you. We've also got one from Tina. Do we qualify if our club is voluntary run, not for profit, but I teach the sport self-employed in schools and then feed back into the club?
So that was if the club is voluntary run, not for profit organisation.
Yes, so the club is not for profit, but Tina works as a self-employed and works in schools and then feeds those participants back into the club.
So my understanding, and obviously the workforce has always been a little bit of a grey area, is if the self-employed, the funds that was announced by government for self-employed workers should be accessed initially. So again, you should be able to kind of show what your normal income is, how much you would normally take, and obviously apply for that through the self-employment fund that the government have released.
Thank you. We've got Hugh. Can county sports associations apply for the fund?
Yes.
Perfect. Simples. And then I think there was one. Just making sure I don't miss anyone. So there's a lot of chat around the business rates relief as well. And Matt Hewison, I think, cleared some of that up for us, so thank you, Matt. Am I right? So this is John. Am I right in thinking that when completing the online application, there is no save function, so you'll have to be able to answer all the questions in one session, or you'll lose what you've already entered?
Yes, unfortunately, that is also that's true. But the application itself is, like was mentioned, I mean, the first 20 questions are literally about you and your club, so they should be fairly straightforward. You can, on the website, there is a link, and there is a link within the presentation as well, that gets you to the set of questions. So if you want to print that out first, make sure you've got all the answers before you start typing. Then obviously you can stick that on a Word document and then just copy and paste across. But yes, you do need to do the application one go, and then obviously submit it at the end. There is no save and return function on.
Great, thank you. We've got a message from Tim as well about we have a number of other sporting bodies who use our facilities, some mainly during the summer months. Would these bodies be able to apply for any of the funding, or should it be through ourselves as the main facility where their activities take place? Currently, we're losing out on revenues from these sporting bodies.
So again, my understanding on this one is the club or organisation that is in financial difficulty, that's in financial need, can and should apply. So that could be all of those different clubs that are using a venue, or it could be the parent club, if you like, the one that's losing the money from a venue point of view. So yeah, if you've got I don't know, netball, tennis, etc., all played, and they're all clubs in their own right, if they're facing financial difficulty, they should apply. Likewise, if it's the facility company, etc., that's not for profit and providing a service, then they should apply.
And the last one, I think, is from Robert. As a golf club, can we appeal to the RV to make it relevant to the turnover of our business?
Okay, I think this is one of those questions that's come in that's gone back to Sport England. So we will probably pick that one up after the webinar and send an email across to you and answer that question directly.
Brilliant. I think that was everything, unless I've missed something. You can just type in the chat box and I'll pick it back up.
I'll just pick one up if that's okay, guys, in terms of, we've had a couple of questions around multi-sports clubs where there's an umbrella organisation which provides a lot of the infrastructure, buildings and stuff, with separate clubs below them with their own budgets, accounts, and that question about who was best to apply. And what they've said is they've come back to say if the costs are all different for the clubs and there's no duplication of what the funds would be for, i.e. there's no profit making on the fund, and all of the clubs are independently constituted with financially separate clubs, then it's suggested for the clubs to apply independently. You could note in that in each application about the overall situation at the site to help that assessor get the full sort of situation. But what they've said is if you're a multi-sports club or an umbrella organisation with a number of clubs that sit underneath that with their own budgets and financial, they're financially separate, they want the individual clubs to answer them. So it was just on the back of the question around kind of multi clubs and stuff.
Okay. Well, we've got just a couple of slides left. So again, if there's any burning questions that you want answering before we do leave tonight, then fire them into the chat and we will have a kind of final wrap up question and answer session at the end as well. But the funding package Damien went through at the beginning. Obviously, there's 4 elements to it. 2 of them are possibly not relevant for the majority of people. Obviously, the Community Emergency Fund we've been through tonight. There is the £55 million. It's been called Innovation Fund. It's been called Sector Stimulation Fund. I don't think they've got an exact title for it yet. But again, this is a bit of a watch this space. The fund, the discussions around it at the minute is around when the restrictions are lifted, how do we support the sector to stimulate activity, to get people active, to get people back to how they were engaging with sports clubs, potentially those that have changed their behaviour through this time. I mean, I'm sure people are seeing similar things to me, that you've got lots more people out walking, lots more people out running and cycling, and some people are actually changing their behaviour and doing more physical activity now than they're used to. How do we as a sector bring them into the fold and keep them active through all the great activities and sports that you guys are putting on and offering? When it comes out also, there may be, if it comes out early enough and we are still in lockdown, there may be an element of actually, can people be innovative? Can people get people active whilst we're in lockdown? So whether that be online sessions, etc. There'll kind of be two paths, if you like, to this fund. One will be about stimulating the sector as we come out of the lockdown, and one could be is how do we keep people active now? Obviously, it's been mentioned we don't have a great deal of detail on this fund yet. The priority obviously was to get the emergency relief fund out there, but we will have more details on this fund as and when Sport England release them. They usually talk to the active partnerships and let us know what is going on and when the funds are being released and when the information for those funds are being released as well. So we will have that on our website and we will have that on our social media channels pretty much as soon as it comes out. So if you are potentially thinking of the future and how we can help people, there could be a fund that, again, you might want to look at. And as far as I know, there won't be any consequence of applying for both funds effectively. Just one thing that hasn't been picked up as well through all of the slides that we have done. If you are an organisation that's already in receipt of Sport England funding, you are, unless it's probably a small grant, you probably have a Sport England relationship manager or contact at Sport England that you would speak to. If that is the case and you are struggling financially, you need to go and speak to them initially, and they will help guide you through the process in terms of whether you can apply for the Community Emergency Fund or not, and what your options are as well. I know we've got a couple of people on the call today that might already have large grants from Sport England, so if that's the case, do speak to your contact. Lastly, we just thought that we'd put out there kind of what we're doing in the background as active partnerships and the support that we might be able to offer. So I'll pass over to North Yorkshire Sport first.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I think there's kind of lots going on, but what I would say is we can help field some of the questions. So we've clearly had some through the sign up, and as I say, we've gone back and I have got those, so I will get those out to those individuals where it was a little bit more complex, or we don't think we've covered it on the webinar. But we are more than happy to field those initial questions, both Laura or myself at North Yorkshire Sport. And what we would say is send those into info@northyorkshiresport.co.uk, and they'll be picked up by a number of staff members as well. We are really keen from a further support point of view to hear people in terms of if you're unsuccessful with the community emergency funding, as there may be other opportunities, and as always, we would want to try and plug you into other avenues of support. We're really keen to support clubs in this period to look at where there's an element of delivery that could be taken online. And we've seen some really great fleet-footed stuff, actually, of people being able to run online, classes for their participants and virtual runs and a whole range of other things. There's just a number of training opportunities around volunteers and club members through YH Learning. So both Active Humber, ourselves, and Yorkshire Sport Foundation are all putting on a range of online webinars and online content, and we can send those details out to people. So there's lots on there around recruiting volunteers and supporting your workforce, and a whole range of online learning that we've been working on too. We've got a range of webinars that we're putting on, and again, all of the details will be on our social media site. So for those that are based on our patch, we're going to do a series of conversations with particular experts over the next few weeks, and it'll be looking at things like mental health and physical activity. There'll be topics around finances. There'll be topics around engaging older participants. So there's a whole range of things that we're hoping we can help upskill people with in the next couple of weeks. We and Active Humber and a load of other organisations have got a range of ways and ideas of getting people active, and again, both of our websites, it should be front and centre there, and obviously the link is there. So activities to stay at home for young people, for families, for older people, and a whole range of other stuff. And my kind of last bit really is just urge people to keep on top of the website, keep checking out any of the updates on the funds. We'll get that out as quickly as possible to people. But I guess what I would say is if in doubt, get in touch, and we'll always, we certainly try our best to help. That's me, Gary.
And thank you. And the reason I put Damien first is because there are certain things that we are doing jointly. So some of the stuff that already has been mentioned, the Yorkshire and Humber Learning Community and the club support webinars are obviously a joint thing between ourselves, North Yorkshire Sport and Yorkshire Sport Foundation, and they will cover hot topics. So again, there might be something there of interest that you want support with in coming weeks, and that'd be great to have you on those as well. Or you might be struggling with a certain topic that you want to put forward as something that can be talked at or covered in those webinars, or online modules that are available as well. And again, please do, because you're probably not the only one with hot topics that need covering. Similar to North Yorkshire Sport, all of our information is on our website. It's the probably best place to go to start off with. There is stuff on there on funding. There is continuous updates and advice from the government around the coronavirus and the current situation we're in. There is lots of activities to stay active at home in your local area, and they're all put up on our website. There's obviously some of the ones that people will know about, such as Joe Wicks PE, but there is also lots of localised stuff that is starting to happen as well, and people are adapting to the situation, and all of that is on there as well. And I know lots of our clubs are open to, if there's a video or a challenge, etc., then you can go on there and access some of them. Likewise, if they're not on there, we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to know what's happening in the area, and if we can help promote stuff, we will do. And then lastly, I think one thing that the sports sector has done nationally is respond to this situation. We have lots of volunteers within our sports clubs generally, and we don't take that for granted. We certainly value the work that everybody does. What we are seeing during this period is obviously we might not be able to run our usual football sessions and what have you, but there are services and charities out there that need volunteers to help take things to people that are maybe less mobile or self-isolating and what have you. So again, on our website, we have got some opportunities on there, working with our partners where volunteers are needed. And obviously, the longer this period goes on, we need to replenish those volunteers that maybe started 2 or 3 weeks ago and need a little bit of a break as well. So they're all on there. And lastly, from myself as well, on the call we do have a number of our partners as well as clubs and organisations and what have you. If Active Humber, if you need support, you can get in touch with Active Humber and one of our team will probably be able to help. Equally, we've got the likes of Hull Culture and Leisure and Alistair Wood that's on the call as well, who's got specific time and resource to help clubs in Hull to take you through some of this process as well. So I would encourage you to drop us an email if you do need support, and we can signpost you to the relevant people, because there are lots of organisations. And I think during this current period as well, this isn't a case of us looking at, come to us for help. Actually, it's get the help wherever you can, access the funds wherever you can. We're really keen to make sure that the Humber and North Yorkshire receive the funding that's needed to keep the sector going. So that's really important. This is the last slide. So obviously it's our contact details. We'll leave them up on the screen for a little bit in case you didn't note them down earlier when the slide was up. But please do keep in touch. Please do follow us on the social media channels, because that's where things will go first. And the websites will obviously house all of the information and the activities that we get through as well. So please do take note of those details. And if you do have any specific questions that you think you need to go direct to Sport England about, they've got their dedicated email address to go through. Obviously it's inundated with bits and pieces, so there is a need to be patient, but please do access that if you need to as well. Laura, do we have any kind of final questions before we close for the evening?
We've got one from Tim. If successful, what would Sport England expect in terms of the tie-in by the club to Sport England?
These similar questions have been asked in the questions that we had previously as well. Things around, do we have to pay the grants back and what have you? The answer to that is no. These are grants, one-off grants made to clubs and organisations that you will tell Sport England how you need to spend that based on your financial need, and you'll basically be given that one-off payment to do what you need with that grant. So there won't be, I presume the club that's asked for this is used to Sport England's monitoring forms, and we need figures for how many participants you're getting through, etc. That's not a requirement as part of this, so you won't be asked for participant numbers and what have you. It's more a case of, we need funding to cover our shortfalls. There it is, use it to keep going.
I think that was it. I think Alistair said that any Hull club, he can help as well. he's happy to help any club. But I think that's it for questions, unless anyone else has anything.
Okay, well, that's great. I can't see anything else coming through on the chat. So obviously, that said, we have been recording this as we've gone through. We will get that on our website and what have you in the very near future. Once I get our IT guys to work out how to change the video and put it onto the web. I would just like to thank everybody for joining us. Reiterate that a survey will come out, and it's not just us checking on whether or not this has been useful for people, but it is also a way of gauging what support is needed now and in the future. So we would appreciate if you spend a few minutes filling that in. Damien, Laura, I don't know whether you've got anything to add, but from me, it's thank you and good luck with your applications.
I've just got one final one. What we'll do is there's the questions that came through when you signed up, and as I said, there was a number of kind of complex ones. If we've not covered them and they're not as straightforward, I will get back to all of the North Yorkshire question clubs, all the clubs that ask the question, and Gary will do the same. But we will, in the next day or so, probably tomorrow, get these out to you. So yeah, as I say, if you've asked a question and we've not answered it, just bear with us, and we'll get back to the end with your answer as quick as we can. And thanks for listening and sort of chipping in.
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Many thanks.
Thank you all.